on what system they are using to do brand evaluation. Because this is an aside, there are a variety of ways by which we can value a brand, right? There's more of a psychological approach, more of a financial approach, more of a marketing, type of, there are a variety of approaches, which, by the way, at this course right here, we're not going to be getting into that kind of detail, right? However, just to make the point that that's what brand valuation is, right? So brand valuation, so yeah, I mean, we see then that the usual cast of characters always occupy the top tier, as you guys rightfully said. What do we have? Well, if we look at, one of the major brand evaluating organizations last year, 2023, we saw that Amazon absolutely was at the top of the heap for that one agency at almost $300 billion. Apple, again, 297, almost 300. Google, Microsoft, absolutely. So we got these in the top tier, right? So at any given year, really, you have your Apple, you have Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook. Nobody mentioned Facebook. Coca-Cola is huge. Samsung is the key thing. Disney, Toyota, as you rightfully said. So all of these, brands typically occupy that top tier kind of role. Even the hockey, the professional National Hockey League, NHL hockey team, the Toronto Maple Leafs, according to one brand evaluating firm, is over $1 billion now, right? So these are, and they're a bunch of losers, by the way. Losers. And even they are over $1 billion, right? So again, as part of our overall mission motivation, that really indicates then that the whole notion of a brand, very important in marketing. And so therefore, it behooves us to understand what that is all about and how it works. And that's what we're going to be unpacking here now. So in more detail then, as we always do, how do we want to sort of set up our discussion for today? We want to set it up by sort of positioning ourselves in our overall marketing map, right? Which is our strategy. So where are we here in our overall strategy? Well, this is where we are, right? We're going to be unpacking this whole piece right down here, product, right? And we've explained all of that over and over again. But that is where we are today and what we're unpacking today. So more specifically then, as I had indicated to you, what are we going to talk about? We are going to be talking about that most sacred of things, brands today, right? And then in addition to that, we're also going to be talking about branding and brand extensions and brand personalities and a variety of other supplementary, highly related topic areas related to brands. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Also, we will be talking about this notion of trivial attributes, and we'll also talk about product harm prices, both topics of which you will not see in the textbook. And typically, we don't see these kind of topic areas in textbooks per se, introductory marketing textbooks. Typically, we don't see those. And you won't get that kind of information from anybody else except me. I always like to bring that those topic areas to my students for a variety of reasons. It's interesting for one thing, talking about, and I believe that it's important for marketing students to know a little bit about these kind of topic areas, and so we will talk about those. So basically what I will disclose to you momentarily comes directly out of the research research on that. So we will talk about some of the cutting edge research and thinking related to these topic areas. So both one of these topic areas that I just referred to, well actually both, brands and trivial attributes. Does this ring a bell with anybody? In terms of what we have done in this course? Does it ring a bell?
Features, benefits.
How about video number 1? Does it ring a bell there? Who watched the video, by the way, or am I just talking to myself? Yeah. Yeah, Mountain Dew, absolutely. And so what was the key takeaway with Mountain Dew then as a brand? And you're absolutely right, very good. Mountain Dew was the brand that we talked about. What was the key takeaway here with Mountain Dew? And we're gonna be talking about that momentarily too. What was the key takeaway with that?
So Mountain Dew was initially starting as the local brand attributes they were mostly adhering, but then again when the US,
Right.
the local attributes, the hillbilly image that they were like portraying onto their brands and their logos and the colors and everything, but
Yeah.
later on when there was this US, there was a change coming to the US, social cultural aspects, the vertical and all those cultural
Yeah.
aspects.
Yeah.
Then slowly and gradually Mountain Dew had to adapt all the cultures and their brands will also get changed a bit, the color, the
So what
Then-
happened as a result of the
So
turmoil?
almost went bankrupt.
yeah,
They almost went bankrupt.
in the middle of the process, they were almost went bankrupt, but then again, they had to adapt with the social cultural changes and then they realized.
And so at the end of the day, what does that mean then?
So
That social cultural changes can impact.
Absolutely. You two ladies nailed it. Way to go. Well done. Well done. So yeah, we will absolutely be talking about that. Well done. So that's exactly the point. Need I say more? You articulate it beautifully. So basically, the point is, I will repeat it, is that yes, brands absolutely, and brand development absolutely impacted by national culture, right? So that is a key thing. So we recognize that. And furthermore, on the same introductory video that I just showed you some pictures to try to, you know, convey some of the key topic areas in marketing. We also talked about trivial attributes, right? You remember that? Trivial attributes. You remember the picture that we used for trivial attributes? And how trivial attributes kind of sort of work? We'll be talking more about that. Today is the day we're going to be unpacking all of that today, by the way.
It was the anti-perspirant.
That's
We spoke about,
exactly right.
The word clinical being used as a trivial attribute for it.
Absolutely right. Bang on. Well done. Yeah. And so that is a key thing, right? And that was an example. I also mentioned a couple of other examples. Do you remember any of the other examples that I had mentioned? Trivial attribute. Here we're,
coffee brands and shampoos,
yeah, like what though? What was a trivial attribute?
so Professor mostly it was like, if the product base is same, but you are getting some tagline or some words that are making
Attributes.
customers think that attributes that are making customers think that the product somehow is different than the other.
Right?
So therefore it's-
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep, very good. Yep. And so, yes, we did talk about those, right? So when we talk about some of the other ones, you know, silk, the word silk in shampoo, I have a couple pictures that I grabbed last week to show you. Silk, you know, is there silk in shampoo? No, there's no silk in shampoo, but the word is printed.
They're trying to make an association.
But the word is printed on the thing in order to convey. Is there a question? Point of clarification, anything that I can clarify though? You sounded like here, is there any question or anything? Oh, it's very hot. It's terrible. And so the problem that we have here, if we turn the system on, it's so loud that we can't, and I've complained about this, by the way. So if you want to do something, why don't you guys complain too, right? Join me in complaining, right? Maybe I should just take my clothes off, right? Would that be okay? Take my shirt off, would that be okay?
No,
What?
no, it's not okay.
Yeah, you're right. So, yeah, okay, what was I saying? Silk, is there silk in shampoo? No, there's no silk in shampoo, but what does it do? It conveys that kind of softness and manageability and everything. So we'll talk about that. So yeah, absolutely, we did talk about that. So again, like I said, during our video, our class number 1, then if you will, I introduced some of these topic areas just to give you a flavor of some, important and quite interesting topic areas within marketing that we would circle back and unpack in today's debate. That's what the point that I'm trying to make. So the first question that we want to ask ourselves then is, what exactly is this thing that we call a brand? What is a brand? What is a brand? And here I'm not looking, you know, don't look it up from somebody else's notes that it's likely not entirely correct, just off the top of your head. That's what I'm looking for, right? By the way, you know, I mean, when I ask questions in class, I'm not asking you to quickly look at somebody else's notes that you might have attained from a previous class, which may or may not be right, by the way, right? In fact, I would argue, probably it's not even right, right? Just saying. So don't rely on somebody else's notes, just saying, you know? Think for yourself, right? That's grown-ups here. Okay, so what's a brand? What is a brand then? Off the top of your head?
Brand is a symbol that embodies the philosophy of the entity that it represents. So
It's simply the logo of
A logo,
business.
sure.
Unique identity of a
Unique
product.
identity. So it differentiates itself, right? So it's all of those things, absolutely, right? So at its core, that's exactly what a brand is. So again, we will talk about that momentarily. When we talk about branding, what is branding all about then? If we recognize then that, you know, a brand is some kind of an identifiable, unique kind of product, if you will, at this point of our discussion, let's accept that. Branding then fundamentally, what it's about how we connect the consumer to the product. In other words, how do we connect, shall we say, how do we connect the product to the consumer? How do we position the brand in the mind of the consumer? That's what branding is all about, and we will talk about that momentarily, right, in more detail. We also want to talk about this notion of brand equity, right? Brand equity, another very important topic area in marketing and in branding and brands. Brand equity, what is that? What is brand equity? Brand value? Who am I looking at? Yeah, okay. So where do you say brand value? What do you mean?
Equity is, where you place your brand, for example, that's the valuation, that's the equity, and when you're selling your brand or the product, that's the equity.
So you're implying then that there's an analogous kind of approach to brand equity as exists in finance then when you're talking about shareholder equity then resulting at the bottom right-hand corner of a balance sheet is what you're saying. Yeah. So yeah, it's related. It's certainly not unrelated. Yeah. But how do we think of brand equity in marketing? I'll tell you now, and I will repeat myself in a little while. When we talk about brand equity, fundamentally, what we're talking about is, and this is how I like to think of it, in a very simple way, it's the benefits that accrue to the consumer over and above the functional benefits. The benefits that accrue to the consumer over and above the functional benefits. That's what brand equity is about. And I like to think of it from a conceptual perspective like that, right? And like everything else, there are a variety of perspectives associated with it. And as we will talk about, some researchers have very clearly articulated, some major dimensions, pieces of this thing that we call brand equity. And that's good. It captures what I'm saying, but conceptually that's what it is. Want me to say it again? It's the benefits that accrue to the consumer over and above the functional benefits. So what does that mean then? Those are fancy words. What does that mean? Well, I'll give you an example right here. And this is similar to an example that we used before. In fact, I had a picture of the Goodyear tire in the previous class that I showed you, where I tried to convey to you that, as marketers, we typically want to try to map on the benefits, onto the attributes, right? And why is that important? Because consumers don't buy
The
attributes,
features, the attributes, they buy the benefits.
so benefits are important, right?
Yeah.
So as marketers, we need to convey it to the mind of the consumer. So when we look at that, then we say, okay, well, what would be an example of that? So if I get some new tires for my truck, which I will, unfortunately, this is a real life example, I am going to buy when I go get around to buying it, for my truck, I will buy 4 new Michelin LTX MSP tires, right, which are high-end tires, right? For my truck, very, very high quality, good quality tires, right? And by the way, this is gonna cost me like almost $300 a piece, it's gonna cost me darn near $2,000 tax in for this whole thing, right? At some point. But at any rate, getting back to the tires, you know, is the consumer concerned about the depth of the rubber as an attribute, as a feature? Am I concerned about the shape of the tread? Am I concerned necessarily with the overall aesthetic of it? Am I really concerned with, you know, the composition of the rubber? Am I concerned about the, you know, the metal belt kind of construction associated with it, all these features? Am I really concerned about that? Well, the answer is no, I'm really not that concerned about it. What am I really buying here when I buy said tire? What am I buying? I'm buying
Traction.
safety on the road.
Yeah.
I am buying essentially, but I'm buying stopping
Peace of
distance.
mind.
I'm talking about wet weather handling, snow handling, mud handling capability, stopping distance, like I said, fuel economy. That's fundamentally what I'm buying. Those are the benefits that I am buying from said tire, right?
Yeah.
What benefits are, those are functional benefits,
Functional
all right?
benefits,
Those are
yeah.
functional benefits. Over and above that now we get into the world of brand equity.
Brand
Over and above that, what else am I buying? I am buying a sense of security on the road. I'm buying perhaps a sense of prestige on the road because these are high-end tires, right? So the driver says, you know, enjoys showing them off, or I'm not saying me, but generally the driver might enjoy showing them off, you know, on the road to others, conspicuous consumption kind of thing. So what are we talking about here? That security, by the way, is what we call brand equity. And by the way, lest you think it's not important, it is critically important, because I remember well, maybe 2 decades ago, Michelin, a major tire manufacturer, Michelin developed an entire multi-year ad campaign based on safety associated with their tires, based on brand equity. And in fact, during that campaign, they even had, I remember well, in TV ads and in magazine and pictures on that, they had a tire suspended with chains, swinging back and forth very gently with a little infant in it, like a 6-month-old infant, right, sitting in the tire, you know, smiling, you know, in the tire, right? And so what was that? That was meant to convey to the viewer or the reader then that, what does it convey? That the tires are safe. They're safe for you, they're safe for your family, security in it. And what is that? Brand equity.
Brand equity.
Over and above the functional
Functional.
benefits, right? So brand equity is very, very important. That is what I'm saying. Yeah, so yeah, they are very, very important. So, when we talk about a brand, let's review. What is a brand? Yeah, like I said, a brand absolutely is that trademark, that word, that phrase, that logo, that really depicts a particular product and serves to differentiate it from other product offerings, right? Fundamentally, that's what a brand is all about, unquestionably. And so when we look at a brand then like that, we say, okay, you know, there's a whole lot of meaning that accrues to the consumer from a brand, right? And we will talk about that momentarily. Okay? So my point that I will sort of make right now, and I'll circle back to it momentarily as we continue to drill into some of these topic areas, is this. And that is, there is a whole lot more to a brand than simply just a logo. Well, so for example, you know, when we look at, I don't want to shine it in anybody's face, but if you look at, you know, look at your computer here with a shiny white apple, yeah? Shiny white apple. What is that? It's a brand. What is it?
Brand.
What is, I mean, we all know, what is it? Huh? It's a logo, yeah, but what is it?
Like
It's Apple,
elegance,
it's Apple,
excellence.
it's Apple,
Yeah,
it's Apple, right? That's the brand, it's Apple. So what does it sort of mean to you then? What does Apple, so we see that, we think Apple, we say, oh, got it, and then what happens after that? We think about Apple. How do we think about Apple? Say it loudly.
elegance, excellence, quality.
Yep, which are the elements that sorry?
Expensive.
High price, premium quality,
Premium
exactly,
quality,
right? And that's those are
elegance.
precisely, as you read from someone else's notes, that's exactly what I convey to my classes, yeah. So when we look at the Apple, for example, absolutely, it conveys elegance, a sexy product design, ease of use, quality, premium price, sense of prestige, because it's a high-end, expensive product, right? And all that comes from just that one little shiny apple, right? So that's pretty powerful. All that information that we are thinking about is embedded strictly in that little apple and really conveyed to the consumer. So when we look at it that way, it is a remarkable kind of a thing here that we talk about. And so when we talk about branding, like I said, it's all about establishing that logo within the mind of the consumer. And we'll talk about that momentarily too, in more detail. And so, yeah, that is key, and I've already spoken that length about that. So, yeah, we get that. So then the question arises, like I always say here, I am making the point then that, yes, we recognize that a brand at its core is that logo, word, phrase, unique design, that, that patent, logo, whatever. Yes, we get that, right? But in addition to that, and this is the point, in addition to that, a brand is a whole lot more than just that. It conveys so much more information to the consumer, as I just described to you when we look at that one Apple logo, for example. Whole lot of information. So therefore, I like to think of a brand essentially as being a crucible. What is a crucible? It's a fancy word for a big cup, right? What do you do with a cup? Typically, what do you do with a cup? You fill the cup, right? And so here, when we look at sort of a brand logo as an empty crucible, what do? We fill it with meaning. We fill it with meaning, and meaning comes from experience. So that is how we want to think about it. So in other words, we can think of a brand as being a repository of all that meaning, right? Which is very, very powerful. Now, when we talk about the meaning within the brand, we recognize, consistent with what we are talking about here as we drill into it more detail, that, yes, that meaning has cognitive components, and importantly, it also has affective components also. In other words, not only do we think about that particular brand, but we also feel it. We also feel it, right? So yeah, we look at that brand and we think, we say, good. Premium price, sure. Ease of use, yeah. Elegant design, yeah. High quality, high price, status, yep, absolutely. Get all that, right? We get all that. We're thinking about it, right? Cognitive components associated with that aspect. But in addition to that, we also say, I like that. It's important if I use that. I'm thinking about getting it, I get kind of excited about it, What are those? Those are all affective kind of states, right? Affect is about emotion. Affect, by the way, the word affect is a big, broad umbrella term. And under that umbrella term, we have emotion, we have mood, we have feelings, we have all these kind of things, right? Those are what we call affective states. So yeah, it's all about how we feel about the brand, right? Get it? I started using that. It just makes me feel so good with my Apple product, so to speak, right? You feel it? Do you agree with that? So And in addition, so we have that, and then in addition to that, we also have the thoughts that occur to us, right? So those are all key things. So the point here is that we have cognitive aspects as well as affective aspects, and that's important too. So yeah, is a brand affected, impacted by culture? Absolutely it is. We already spoke about that, and that was all spoken about during our video number 1, so I won't repeat it here. So that is key. We also recognize that, you know, there are some substantial benefits, pros, if you will, by sort of implementing a whole process of branding and that kind of a thing. And when we look at some of the benefits then associated with a brand, we can sort of divide it into benefits that accrue to the firm and benefits that accrue to the consumers. So if we look at some of the benefits to the firm of building and developing and articulating a strong brand, you know, what do you think some of the benefits are to the firm? Well, it provides that means of differentiating one product offering from another, from either your own or from a competition. So that's a very tangible kind of aspect, that ability to differentiate the product. You know, it allows you to convey that kind of information that I've just mentioned to the consumer. That's very powerful. Can save a whole lot of effort in that regard. What are some other ones that I thought of here? It allows us to, you know, develop these cost-effective kind of product offerings, which is key. And importantly also, as we'll talk about when we talk about brand extensions, it allows us then, using a known brand, to develop and introduce new product offerings into the marketplace. And that could save us a lot of time and effort also. So those are all key things. It also allows us, especially in the case of Apple, for example, to charge a premium, right? We can charge a premium if it makes sense to do so. So it allows us to charge a premium if necessary, or, you know, situate our prices accordingly. So yeah, and also conveys a sort of sense of power too, right? Is Apple a powerful company?
Yeah.
Big time, you know, so it can exert that power. And by the way, power is a very, very important notion in marketing, right? And in channels of distribution, supply chain, for those of you who are in that stream, you know, power is a very, very important consideration, right? Power, very key. We'll talk more about that later, but yeah, power, it sort of can convey that. So it really allows then a tremendous amount of benefits then to the firm. Conversely, there are a wide variety of benefits that accrue to the consumer, right? Like I said, I mean, the consumer will see it, they will attain an awful lot of meaning from that brand, and that's very powerful too. So if they can get meaning from a brand, what does that mean? That means then that it reduces search costs, which is very important in marketing, right? Minimizing search costs, you see it, you know what the brand is all about, therefore, you know, you don't need to be searching any more in the marketplace, because you know that particular brand offers all that. So it reduces search cost, it really becomes an assurance of quality, as I had mentioned to you. Furthermore, as I had alluded to earlier, you know, it really becomes a way of conveying a sense of identity to others, right? Which is an important thing, right? Yeah, especially when we talk about conspicuous consumption and that kind of thing. Why do you think people, you know, are quite willing to spend, you know, for high-end exotic vehicles? Why do you think people are quite willing to spend, you know, $250,000 on a high-end Beamer or Mercedes, or $500,000 on a Rolls Royce, or $25,000 on a Rolex watch? Why do you think people are doing that?
It aligns with their perception of themselves.
Because it conveys that
Identity.
identity to others to a large extent, and that is a very powerful motivator for many consumers. So it conveys that. So again, as it relates to brands and marketing, that's all critically important stuff. Like that's the kind of thinking we want to bring to bear here. So we recognize that. So it allows consumers to sort of, convey that kind of lifestyle, if you will, right? So that is key. So all the while, yes, it is a promise, right, to the consumer, right? So if I'm the brand owner, I'm the marketing manager, I can promise my consumer, you buy my Rolex watch, or indeed you buy my Timex watch, right? The opposite, you buy my, $25 Timex watch, and guess what? I promise you, a very, very high value product, meaning you get a lot of benefits for a low price. I promise you, right, for buying a Timex watch, I promise you good quality, reliability associated with the product, that I promise you, Am I promising, a high-end lifestyle? No, obviously not. That's a very pragmatic value-added brand, right? But I'm promising that to you. But if I'm a brand manager for, say, in Canada for Rolex, what am I promising here to again, I'm promising that, that lifestyle, that potential to convey your lifestyle, that elegance, that prestige. I'm really promising the consumer that high-end brand equity. So these are all key things, right? So, when we talk about brands then, at this point I will say, there's a lot to it, right? So brands. So yeah, when we talk about, yes, it being more than just a logo, it's a whole lot more, right, as I articulated. To me, anyway, I think that's pretty fascinating. Pretty fascinating. So that is key. So. There it is. So, let's talk a little bit about some Mother British basic grade 2 terminology here before we carry on here. When we talk about brands, there are a variety of labels and types of brands that should be very clear to us. First of all, we talk about what we call a corporate brand, right? A corporate brand. And what is a corporate brand? A corporate brand is simply a brand that is also the name of a firm, a company, right? So if I were to say to you, Clorox, what is Clorox? It's a brand name, and it is also the name of a company. And it's also the name of a product, corporate brand. If I were to say to you, GE, General Electric, what is that? Name of a company, and it is also a brand name. Right? So that's a corporate brand. We have what we call corporate parent brands, corporate parent brands. And these are brand names essentially that bear the name of the parent company. So, for example, Corolla, you will never see Corolla marketed as Corolla alone. Right? You won't see that. Instead, what will you see? Toyota Corolla. Right? You will never see a desk writer. You'll never see a desk writer or laser writer printer marketed as a laser writer. Right? You will always see it as HP. Laser writer. Right? HP. And so therefore, yes, that's what we call a corporate parent brand. We also have distinct product brands, and a distinct product brand is basically that brand name, right? So a distinct product brand would be something like your Crest. Crest toothpaste, right? It's marketed alone, which is over P&G, right? Okay. Yeah. So that is marketed alone, distinct product brand, right? So we have that, for example. We'll park on the side for now, brand extensions. We'll circle back and talk about that momentarily. And we also have co-brands. And when we talk about co-brands, and co-branding efforts that essentially is where we have two distinct brands that are coupled together for a particular product. They're coupled together and marketed together. Two distinct brands that are put together and marketed together. So what do we call that? Co-brands. So there's an example right there. Two well-known brands, Ben and Jerry ice cream, as well as Netflix. Yeah. And of course, there are a variety of other ones, right? We can see Breyers ice cream and Crispy Crunch or Coffee Crisp chocolate bars marketed together. Dell computers with an Intel processor. Acer computer with an AMD processor, you know, marketed together, right? So we have that kind of thing going on, right? So those are just a couple of types of brands, terminology that we use for people. Now let's talk a little bit about branding, that very, very important process of branding, which is key. Before we do that, let me just emphasize one thing too, and that is when we talk about brands and brand building, this is a key point here that I hope you will capture. A key point is that when we talk about brands and building a brand is built by all 4 Ps. Okay, so it's not just a promotional effort, it's not just advertising, not just, select pricing, it's everything. A brand is built by using all 4 Ps, right? Which is consistent with what I think that's spoken about. So that is key. Now, when we talk about branding, what did I say branding was again, by the way? It's all
It's a
about
bridge between the
establishing that connection of the brand in the mind of the consumer, right? So what are we doing? We're taking that brand, connecting it, and positioning it, if you will, positioning it in the mind of the consumer. That's what branding is all about, right? And so why is that so important? Because it really allows the consumer to quickly capture some of the key and understand some of the key attributes and benefits that are associated with the brand, like quality, for example, and other benefits, right? And so the whole process then of establishing that connection becomes very, very important. Fundamentally, in addition to everything we're speaking about, what else does a brand do for a consumer? And why is branding so important? It is a means of reducing risk. It reduces risk, right? So in other words, I buy that Apple computer, I know that chances are it's going to be good quality, highly reliable, et cetera, et
Last
cetera.
for a
It's going to
while.
fulfill my, the benefits that I'm seeking, right? And what is that doing? It reduces the
the
unknown.
risk, anxiety.
And in so doing, another way of conceptualizing reducing unknowns is reducing risk. Risk is all about unknowns, right? And volatility. So it reduces risk, and that's a key thing, right? And that's a key thing. It also is a way of, like I said, conveying prestige to others, right? Which is very important for some consumers, right? So that is key. So how do we do all that? Well, whose job is it to do all that? It is the brand manager's job to do that, right? The brand manager's job. A key marketer. And brand management, by the way, the brand manager is a very high-level job within an organization. So it's a very important job. It's not an entry-level job at all. I mean, it takes, years and years and years, decades to get into a brand manager's job, or generally. So it's a pretty high-powered job for the brand manager. So fundamentally, it's the job of a brand manager to do that. So therefore, we can ask ourselves, what is brand management? Right? What is brand management? Well, there are a variety of perspectives associated with brand management. I like to adopt sort of the definition. There are, like everything else, there are a variety of definitions, just like everything else in marketing, right? So I like to adopt the definition that comes out of the literature by a high-level researcher, who just happens to be a big friend of mine. His name is Neeraj Tewar out of IIT. And so the way that Neeraj, specifically Tewar and Anderson, conceptualize brand management is that they conceptualize it as being leveraging brand equity for profitable ends. You're leveraging that brand equity, like I just described, why? To profitable ends, and that's what brand management is all about. So it really focuses a little bit more on those intangible aspects of the brand, so to speak. So that is key. And furthermore, like I said, what did I say brand equity was? Like I said, I like to think of it conceptually, like I told you, it's a very nice, simple little way of thinking about what brand equity is. I'll say it again, it's the benefits that accrue to the consumer over and above the functional benefits. So, like everything else, in marketing, there are a variety of definitions that exist. Some leading researchers in brand equity, guys named David Aker, and others, have defined brand equity as this. I will read it to you, strictly FYI. Brand equity is a set of assets and liabilities linked to a brand's name and symbol that adds to or subtracts from the value provided by a product or service to a firm or that firm's customers. I feel exhausted just reading all that. But I just read that to you to convey to you that there are a variety of definitions out there, and to convey to you that approach is a very prominent kind of approach in research and in the literature in my world. That's a common approach. That's the way we typically approach, brand equity. But it's not different from what I just told you. What I offer to you is just a simpler definition of it. It's a simpler, easier definition, other than the verbose kind of notion here. However, it does beg to make the point here, and that is that really when we talk about brand equity, again, consistent with what I told you, is that it really is about those assets and those liabilities, right, that exist within a brand. And so Aker and colleagues have suggested really that when we look at brand equity, they suggest then, and they've identified 5 major dimensions of brand equity, and this you will probably see in the textbook. This is a common approach that you see in the textbook, right? And so what is it? They suggest then that brand equity consists of loyalty, awareness, quality, associations, and other assets, right, essentially. So when we look at it that way, what essentially are they talking about? They're suggesting then that there's this notion of loyalty embedded in brand equity. And what is loyalty? It's that likelihood to engage in repeat same brand purchasing. That's what loyalty is about. There's awareness, and when we talk about brand awareness, it's that ability of the consumer to recognize the brand. There's this notion of perceived quality. Quality is really about, the expectation as to how the brand will perform, essentially. And an important aspect associated with perceived quality also that bears mentioning is that sometimes quality, relatedly equity here, but quality can be viewed as a very product-specific kind of entity. And it can also be viewed as having what we call a halo-like kind of aspect also to it, right? Very product-specific, or it can even have more of a halo kind of an aspect to it. And so what do we mean by that? Well, when we talk about a halo kind of an effect, this would be an example of that. It's where the opinions, if you will, on one product sort of extends out to other related products. So what does that mean? Well, take for example, a consistent example we're using, which is Apple. So if you have an Apple, say, iPad, by virtue of the fact that it's Apple, and you perceive it to be high quality, pursuant to the overall halo effect, you would also think that the Apple Buds are high quality. That the Apple laptop is also high quality. That the Apple, do they still make iPods even? I don't think so, right?
Yes.
Or iPhones, the Apple iPhones are high quality, right? So what is that? What are we describing here? What am I describing?
Basically the phenomenon that it's the perceived quality.
Quality, the halo
If the
effect.
brand makes this
That-
well, it should make the
Other
other things
things,
as
yeah,
well.
and that's the overall halo effect, right? So if you like Toyota Corolla, for example, you know, or if I like my F-150 truck, for example, the halo effect with that then would be that I also kind of think that Ford would produce other high-quality
High-quality
vehicles, like, you know, some of the other vehicles that they produce, right? Halo effect, right? And that's all related to quality. We also have different types of associations that can be made, you know, consistent with what I was talking about. So those associations, you know, with regard to equity could be very personal, they can be more cognitively based, absolutely. They can be very emotional, right? So consumers can have a very emotional association associated with a brand like that. But there are some people, for example, who will look at that Apple logo, and you know what? They will get very mad because they hate Apple products, right? There's some people who, you know, hate Apple products, right? That's a negative association. There's some people who will look at those golden arches of McDonald's and get very mad because they hate McDonald's, right? And everything associated with it. There are other people that will hate Walmart, for example, right? Very, very substantial negative kind of association associated with that. So those are key things, right? So you have a variety of things like that. And also there are other brand aspects associated to, you know, trademarks and the type of patents that exist and that kind of thing. So, armed with all of that now, let's talk about another important consideration here. And this is yet another topic area that is very important in marketing that I first introduced you to in our video number 1. Here we go, back to the video again. And that is this notion of what we call brand extensions, right? You remember we talked about brand extensions? Yep, absolutely. Yep. And how did I define brand extensions? In other words, what are brand extensions? And you're absolutely right.
The mother company is Excel.
The mother company. What about the father company? Mother or father? Is it a mother or a father?
I think it's the mother.
think
That's
it's
the
the
how
mother?
mother is.
The mommy brand or the daddy brand?
No, no.
As in, who's your daddy? Who's your daddy? Right? Right, am I right? Who's your daddy? So what is it? Is it a mommy or a daddy brand?
Let's call it a parent brand.
Oh, yeah, or grandparent brand. So yeah, no. Yeah, parent brand, yes.
So it's an Excel RAM processor. So from that, they wanted to introduce that Excel processor. So eventually, when we have the perception that Excel RAM is a good product, we eventually think the logic will be the good product as well.
Essentially so. So we capitalize on that spillover effect.
So we leverage the known brand name to enter a new product category.
Absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely correct. In fact, I think during our first meeting, I had mentioned a little bit about brand extensions, and I think you had mentioned it as you just mentioned it now, actually, right?
That's how it was in the video.
Huh?
That's how it was in the video.
It's how it was in the video, yeah, absolutely. And then, you know, when we first met together
Yeah.
in person, I spoke a little bit about it, and I remember asking you, and you said that. I don't know whether you remember or not, but I remember. You remember?
Vaguely,
Vaguely?
vaguely.
Well, it's crystal clear in my mind. Okay, anyway, so yeah, that's exactly what it is, enter a new product category. So when we have Coke going to Coke Classic, going to Coke, Diet Coke Vanilla, is that the brand extension? It's not.
That's a product name.
Exactly right, exactly right. Yeah, very good. So we got that, and that's exactly it, right? The Excel gum is what we use, right? So Excel is Excel gum, but that is not gum, that's a cough drop, and we explained it there. And here, by the way, I took that picture a few weeks ago, by the way, for use in this class, so I slapped it in there last week, actually. And here, what do we have? We have Tim Hortons. Yeah, yeah. Tim Hortons, and of course, Tim Hortons doesn't work, typically in the ice cream product category. So here we are using that known brand name, leveraging a known brand name to enter a new product category. And what do we call that? We call it a brand extension. Not,
For instance,
what's that?
Tim Hortons producing listen,
What?
like Tim Hortons. Actually, they
Yeah.
just started making pizza. Is it something like that?
Yeah, well, Tim Hortons is basically a coffee shop, right?
Yeah.
Convenience
But now
coffee
they,
shop kind of.
but now they sell pizza.
Yep, exactly. And there's some others I can't remember, I think I put it in here too, there's also Tim Hortons soup that you will see here too. So yeah, exactly right, not to be confused with line extensions. So that's what it is. So what is a brand extension then? I'll say that yet again, it is where we leverage a known brand name to enter a new product category. And so what is the critical issue here associated with that, and why does that work? Well, the first thing to recognize, when we talk about brand extensions and reasons why it's so important is that, when we look at new product introductions into the marketplace, we see in fact that the vast majority of new product introductions in fact are brand extensions. Upwards of, 75, 80, 85% of new product introductions into the marketplace in fact are brand extensions. So therefore, as marketers, we need to understand how this kind of thing works. So therefore, we say, okay, what is it? It's essentially whereby, as you sort of alluded to, that there's a transference that exists. A transference that exists from we call it a parent brand. We can either call it a parent brand, sometimes you will see it known as an incumbent brand, sometimes you will see it called a core brand. But basically, let's call it a parent brand, from that parent brand to the extended brand. There's a transference that exists, right? Whereby the consumer will look at that, and this is the power behind it, the consumer will look at that Excel Gunford or Excel Tosas or Tim Hortons, and you know what? It lends instant credibility, instant likability to that extended brand. So, when you think about it, that's a very, very powerful notion for us as marketers. We introduce it, we put a known brand, and all of a sudden, boom, consumer recognize it, and there's that kind of presumed liking, if you will, that exists. Very, very powerful for us as marketers. So that's the kind of thinking that exists. So here now, I just said there's a transference that exists, right? Transfer from the parent brand to the extended brand. So then, as we do in marketing, we then say, okay, well, that's kind of cool. What transfers? What is the what in fact does transfer? And what transfers here is attitude. It's a transference of attitude. An attitude in marketing consumer behavior has a very special meaning here. Attitude. And that's a key thing. Tell me a brand that you love. Right. Exactly. How long have you had that love for Coke? Forever and ever? Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good example. And many consumers do have that love of Coca-Cola. Absolutely. And it's one like we were talking about, one of the most powerful. Absolutely. Good example. Coca-Cola. Yeah. What about a brand that you hate? What is a brand? What is a brand that you hate? TD? Oh, interesting, okay. And why is that? Why do you hate TD? Let me guess, you tried doing some banking there when you got to Canada and they just jerked you around. Yeah. They probably lied to you, they lied to you, they offered you stuff they didn't want, right? And then they jerk you around when you tried to correct it, you hate them. So you're not a TV customer. So you hate TD, you got it. That's sort of the way that I feel about Bank of Montreal too, by the way. But, okay, so what did, I'm interested now. I'm always interested in these kind of things, right? So what did you do as a consumer then? You went from TD to,
CIBC.
you like CIBC?
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah. You love CIBC? Yeah. So that is, so when we talk about brands then like that, and we sort of look at them in terms of what we love and what we hate, what are those? Your love for Coke, your hate of TD, major brands, what are those? Those are attitudes. Those are attitudes. Those are attitudes. And so therefore, what is an attitude? And your example, thank you for sharing it, fits this perfectly. What is an attitude? It is this. An attitude is a learned predisposition to respond positively or negatively to an object. A learned predisposition to respond positively or negatively to an object. And that's an important thing, right, in marketing. Because that tells us a whole bunch of things, right? A learned predisposition or likelihood to respond positively or negatively to an object. So that tells us some key things, right? That's what an attitude is. Attitude, critically important consumer psychology and marketing. Attitude is, right? If we get it wrong as marketers, negative attitude develops like that, that's very worrisome for TD, right? Very worrisome. So what is it? It's a learned predisposition. In other words, you weren't born with it. It wasn't hardwired into your DNA. There are other things that are hardwired into our DNA as humans. Attitude is not. Attitude is learned. So therefore, as marketers, what does that mean? That means that we could leverage basic psychological concepts of learning to essentially teach the consumer about a particular brand. And that's largely, that's a large component of branding is basically just educating, teaching the consumer using basic elements of learning theory, by the way, association side. And we won't get into that detail here now. But it's learned, right? You learned to hate TD. But the learned predisposition or likelihood to respond. Here is, we're talking about disdain, dislike, right? That's what we're talking about. So therefore, in contrast to Coke, which is a love affair, right? With Coke. And so what are we saying here? We're saying that they're both attitudes. We're saying one is love, one is hate. So therefore, an attitude then is possessive of valence, right? Valence. Plus, minus, good, bad, love, hate. That's what valence is about, right? Negative, positive, that kind of thing. So it's valence. So here we have an attitude, one that we love and one that we hate, for example, right? So that is key. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about the transference of the attitude to the extended brand. And that's what really transfers is attitude. So if TD comes out with, let's say, a TD toy teddy bear for kids. Right, exactly, right? Or a TD shirt, which I have, by the way. I have a TD shirt. Would you like it? I'll give it to you. It's green shirt. It has TD investments or not. My late brother gave it to me.
What is the Van Giant employ a lot of people?
Yeah. Would you like it? I'll give it to you. No? Okay, but if I said I'd give you a CIBC one, would you take that? Yeah. And in my office, for a Coke logo, I have a great big, huge, big round Coke logo, big red Coke logo actually in my office. Yeah. Would you like that? Would you like that? Yeah, you love it. So yeah, valence, right? Love, hate, that kind of thing. That's what attitudes are. So again, when we seek to understand how this stuff works, then it is very much that transference. And so the central notion around brand extensions then is recognizing that we need to ensure that there is fit between the extended brand and the parent brand. The extended brand has to fit the parent brand. FIT, fit. What's the most important thing here for a successful brand extension? FIT, fit, critically important. So let me illustrate this in a little bit more detail here. Let's take an example that I always like to give. This is, mainly I'd say 99% fiction here, but it's based on reality, right? And so what do we have here? This is, a typical kind of a diagram that we can use and model it all out when we do this kind of thing, all right, brand extensions. So we have here a parent brand that I am calling Dutchman Trailers. Now, this is true. Dutchman is a major trailer manufacturer, branded. And what do they make? They make big trailers, big RV-like trailers, right? And I don't know if any of you have really attended to or seen those kind of trailers before, but here we're talking about these big, 20, 30, 40-foot long, big, hard top
big
trailers. They have bedrooms and, bathrooms and showers and kitchens and chairs and fireplaces, all this kind of stuff in a big RV kind of thing, right? So they make that. Right, so that is what Dutchman is all about. Now, let's say, and this is true too, let's say Dutchman then engages in a brand extension whereby they get into another product category, which is the tent trailer category. And what a tent trailer is, by the way, is a smaller, probably not more than, maybe from there to maybe there, and maybe from there to about here, kind of a thing on wheels, a trailer. And so the way that works is that it has a hard top and you sort of crank it up. And then what you do is you pull out the sides and then, the canvas tent will sort of emerge out of it. And that's where the beds are. Are you finding this interesting, by the way, or am I boring? Is this interesting or not? If it's boring, I could just stop right now. Is it good?
Yeah.
Is it okay? Okay. So, tent trailer, different product categories, right? Completely different thing from the big hardtop kind of a thing. So, that's a brand extension, really. Completely different product categories. Now, the rest is fiction, but it serves to illustrate my point. Now, let's say from there, let's say Dutchman then extends that extended brand into sort of a camping tents, right? Tents, canvas tents that you go out into the field and you camp with. Let's say they extend that out into, say, camping equipment, lanterns, stoves, camping equipment like that. Let's say from there, they get involved in, say, outdoor apparel, like hiking boots, right? So let me ask you then, does that make sense? That flow of sort of successive product introductions, extensions, does that make sense to you? Yeah, makes sense to me too, absolutely. Now let's, in our mind's eye, let's extract those three center extensions out of the whole thing. Does it make sense then for Dutchman to go right from Dutchman to hiking boots? Does that make sense to you? Is there fit boots and a great big huge RV trailer? No, absolutely not. At least to my way of thinking, it doesn't make sense at all. So therefore, it allows us to illustrate some key things here when we're talking about brand extensions. It allows us then to say that a brand, and here's a key word that we use to denote this, can stretch farther through the use of successive product introductions, extensions, through successive sequential extensions that parent brand can stretch farther. Right? That's a key thing. Furthermore, we also recognize another key thing is that those parent brands that are perceived as being high quality in the mind of the consumer, the research shows that they can stretch farther. That's another key takeaway. So these are important for brand management. So we recognize that, and then we say, okay, well, you know, here we have stretch, and here we also have another notion that we talk about in the research when we talk about brand management, and that is direction, stretch and direction. Use a direction. So an opposite direction to that is something like this. Let's say Dutchman gets involved in personal hygiene products. Is there a good fit there? No. And then let's say they get involved in diapers, Dutchman diapers. Does that make sense? No. Is there a fit there? Absolutely not fit. Right? So it just doesn't fit and it doesn't make sense. Yeah, go ahead.
Could that not be a diversification?
I hear you.
Is that a diversification? Can you see the Dutchman is
Diversifying.
Can you say Dutchman is diversifying their business? Can we say this is diversification? Maybe they are trying to go into another kind of business.
Well, I mean, if you want to use the word diversification, you could probably sort of use it in the context of a brand portfolio. And you could probably say, if you wanted to, that if you want to use that word, you could probably say, you know, yeah, we're engaged in these brand extensions, and in so doing, we're engaging in brand successor brand extensions like that. And in so doing, we are diversifying our brand portfolio. So if you want to use the brand diversify, or the word diversify, you could probably use it in that context. Is it diversification in the sense of sort of a corporate strategy? Not really from a strategy perspective. I mean, you're not talking about any merging or acquisitions, and you're not sort of diversifying it from that perspective. So, yeah, that's what I would say to that. That make sense to you? So, brand extensions, right? Very important here, brand extensions. So when we talk about brand extensions, like I said, the majority of new product introductions, in fact, are brand extensions. Here's a picture that I took just about a week ago, actually, and I popped it in there. Yeah. Pretty expensive, eh? $379 for a Canada suit. Unreal. So, yeah, so it's about leveraging those new, those brand names, you know, like I said. What else did I want to tell you about it? Yeah, so that, you know, that extended brand then really can enjoy instant credibility, instant recognition as such. But fit is very, very important. Now, like everything else in marketing, right, it's not a panacea. There are potential pitfalls here. And that is, while we recognize that the majority of, that a lot of brand extensions are successful, and in fact, let's talk about some of those successful brand extensions. I'll tell you some. Tide, the detergent. Tide, and quite a few years ago, they came up with what they call a Tide pen, which is basically like a marker kind of a thing where you take it, you have a stain on your shirt, you rub it on the thing, the liquid will evaporate, and the stain goes away, kind of like a Tide pen. Great winner for those guys. Clorox is bleach, like I said. They also got involved in toilet bowl cleaner, completely different product category, right? That was a success for them. Well-known example is Crest, right? Crest is toothpaste. Crest also extended into another category of more aesthetic aspects, and that is the whitening strips, right? That was big for them. How about Bic, right? Bic lighter. You know, when I was a kid growing up, Bic only made Bic pens. They got into lighters. Highly, highly successful for them. Let me give you some examples of floppers. You know, Virgin conglomerate, right? Yes? What? Virgin Mobile.
No,
Virgin
conglomerate.
Mobile, Virgin Air, Virgin Cruise, the whole, conglomerate owned by Branson, right, essentially, Virgin. So Virgin got involved in water purifiers. Is there a good fit there? No, it flopped. Bic, I talked about Bic. Bic tried getting involved in Bic underwear. That flopped. Colgate, the toothpaste, they tried getting involved in frozen kitchen entrees. That failed. Harley Davidson, the bike, they got involved in Harley Davidson cake decorating kits. That flopped. Dr. Pepper.
Blackberry.
Dr. Pepper got involved if they tried Dr. Pepper meat marinade. That flopped. Lifesavers. In fact, I remember this fully quite a few years ago. Lifesavers tried getting involved in Lifesaver pot. Drink Lifesaver. That flopped.
Blackberry too. Blackberry.
Blackberry? Okay, what about Blackberry?
When they sold it up to Apple and iOS.
Okay,
When they sold DBM to Apple and iOS. So it flopped.
yeah. So what's the key concern here when we talk about a flopper like that, or floppers? When there is an extended failure like that, right? What is the concern? We are concerned about the impact that failure will have on our
Brand.
parent brand. Yep.
Because, yeah,
That's what concerns us, right?
perception is going to
That's
be
exactly right. So it's that backwards, so we're concerned about that. And if that happens, then we have to take corrective action and do a whole bunch of stuff, right? But at any rate, at the end of the day, like I say, fit is critically important.
But Bic wasn't a failure, they used to make pen, then they made lighter.
Yeah.
That wasn't related.
Pardon me?
That wasn't related. How is it a good fit for Bic making lighters?
I would suggest that both of them are plastic products. Both of them are disposable products. Both of them have that same kind of plasticky feel to them. It became, there was absolutely highly sort of, easy to make association between the big lighter and the pen. And the history proves that it was highly successful. So, proof is in the pudding, right? Yeah. But I would say that was good fit though. I would say absolutely it's good fit. Right? They're both price-wise, they're both very versatile. So there are a lot of similarities, conceptual similarities between the two products and stuff. But it was absolutely a huge thing. I mean, we go out and buy a big light. In fact, I do stand to be corrected on this, but if I sort of recall correctly, I think that the big lighter was the first kind of sort of radical innovation in that sense, whereby it was the first kind of product to produce that disposable lighter. Up until that point, you had to fill, lighter with butane and the whole thing, right? So they were really, don't quote me on this, I could be wrong, but I think that they were pretty well the first. This goes back to the late 60s.
When was the first time they started?
I think I want to think probably, because I can remember being a small kid when they started introducing this magical thing, the big lighter, right? And I want to say, and a quick Google search could sort of capture this. In fact, go ahead and do a Google search if you want. I want to say probably the late 60s is probably when mid to late 60s is when Bic's award.
1973.
Hey?
1973.
73, was it? Okay, yeah. Probably a little earlier than that, but that's a 73. So yeah, so 73. So it goes back a ways then, late 60s, early 70s. Yeah. So at this point then, why don't we take a 10-minute break, unless you want to keep on going. What? No?
Yes,
Does
Prof.
that mean no?
No, Prof. Let's take a break.
You want to take a break?
Yes.
But I'm the one who's doing all the work here, and I'm perfectly willing to. Okay, let's take 10 minutes. Let us reconvene at 25 to 3. 25 to 3, please do not be late. Oh, and I will rest myself. Enjoy your break. Oh.
I think those extension of 30 days Valentine Day. Doesn't it less than Valentine Day?
I don't think so. I have a match elsewhere. Midnight.
Because we know it's Fridays.
Yeah, but I think it's in evening, right? Yeah, I will leave for a match.
Okay.
So,
Okay. What time is it now? 2:36? What time would I say you would start? Right. So again, we're 1 minute past each hour. Okay, so let us restart that, as we have said. And so now then we want to talk a little bit more about branding, yeah, branding, and very important marketing issues associated with branding. So first of all, we recognize sorry, just to wrap up brand extensions. Yeah, much of the research comes from Aker and Keller, by the way. We've already emphasized the importance of transferability, you know, that synergy, that fit, if you will, that is very important. We recognize then also that, you know, in order to maximize the potential for success and extensions, we need to ensure that there are similarities of users, you know, similar to the big thing that we were talking about, yeah. They're basically similar kinds of users, right? Between the lighter and the pen, for example, users who, you know, are quite willing to, you know, buy something cheap, use it bespoke type of thing, right? So similarity of users in that regard is a key thing. The symbol also should be transferable in that notion. So fundamentally then, fit really, as I say, is a critical feature. Now let's talk about branding then. And when we talk about branding, there are a variety of things that we need to sort of pin down. And that is, first of all, what is important is to recognize that brands can have what we call brand personality. And when we talk about brand personality, what is that all about? Well, it begs the question, what is personality then, right? Very important aspect in consumer psychology, right? It represents a big domain of my personal research also, by the way, personality, from a consumer psychological perspective. But when we talk about brand personality, what is it? It's essentially the superimposition of human-like personality characteristics on a brand, right? That's essentially what it is. So what is personality? Personality essentially are those enduring characteristics or responses that a consumer would have to recurrent situations. That's what personality is all about. So when we look at brand personality, you know, Aker, for example, David Aker, you know, Kevin Lane, what's his name? Basically suggested then that there were 5 major dimensions associated with brand personality. You know, so as marketers, when we look at these 5 major dimensions, it helps us to understand the brand a bit better, helps us to do our marketing better too. So when we talk about sincerity, or as they suggest, sincerity, what is sincerity? It's all about that sort of honesty, right? That honesty, that wholesomeness that comes along. Excitement, right? What is the pizzazz associated with the brand, right? Competence, that sort of stability, reliability, quality, you know, being solid, right? That kind of thing. Sophistication is all about that upper crust, high socioeconomic functioning, upper class kind of vibe, right? That's what sophistication is all about. And ruggedness. Ruggedness captures this notion of, you know, this outdoorsy, robust kind of aspect to it. So if, for example, you look at a very prominent brand like, let's say, Jeep Cherokee, what would you call a Jeep Cherokee here? Jeep. A Jeep. You know what a Jeep is, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay, what would you call it? Well, look at the board.
I think it's
Look at the board. Tell me, what would be the brand personality for a Jeep?
ruggedness, competence, maybe.
I would absolutely agree with ruggedness, yeah,
Yeah.
sure, right?
Yeah,
How about
competence
something like
experience.
an Alfa Romeo? I just finished writing a case on Alfa Romeo. You know what Alfa Romeo is?
It's a car.
You know anything about Alfa Romeo?
Ford Explorer.
Pardon me?
Sophistication, I think.
Yeah, you're aware of it. Are you a fan of it yourself, or do you like it, or you just? Sorry?
I'm not a fan, but I know about it.
You know that, yeah, okay, yeah, fair enough, yeah. So, based on what you know, what would be sort of the major personality characteristic of an alpha?
Strong.
While using this, how would you describe it then?
No, not like.
Are you kidding me?
Sophisticated.
Is that a joke? Alfa Romeo is a high-end exotic sports car.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, when we talk about excitement, just as an aside, the whole notion of excitement and that cutting edge kind of vibe associated with it, the fast, the power, the interface driver, vehicle kind of a thing, the excitement that's associated with that, that is something that I would argue is in the Alfa Romeo DNA, and that's something that marketers work very hard, and designers work very hard to
Maintain and
enhance.
enhance.
Also sophistication.
I would not disagree with that, yeah, absolutely. And sophisticated excitement, yeah, for sure, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's the kind of thing. So yeah, personality is an important thing then when we look at brands, you know? So, if a brand then, as we are saying, can have a personality then, another related notion then that we capitalize a lot on in marketing is the whole notion then of the relationship that a consumer has with his or her brand. And so can consumers have a relationship with a brand? And yes, absolutely they can, and they do, and they love it, right? Absolutely. So, a brand can have a very, very pronounced effect on a consumer. Consumers can absolutely take comfort, tremendous comfort in their respective brands.
Yeah.
You walk into a CIBC, for example, and you can take comfort, as I'm assuming you do, you take comfort, which I'm sort of drawing out an implication of what you sort of implied. You can take consolation in the fact that, you'll be treated well, that it'll fit your needs, and that they won't jerk you around, and it'll be good, right? If you consumers will take comfort in various branded foods, for example, Laura Secord chocolates, for example. As a comfort food, consumers will enjoy consuming their particular type of chocolates, for example, right? Comfort. So yes, consumers can absolutely have that relationship with their brands. Which begs the question then, as marketers, one of the key things that we're always focused on, as I said before, is what? Measurement. We're always focused on measurement. Like I always say to you guys, in business, if we do it, we must think about how we measure. Measurement is always at the forefront of our mind, right? If we're doing it, how are we going to measure it? And so therefore, it begs the question in this context, when we talk about this consumer brand relationship, how do we measure that? How do we observe it? How do we learn about it? Well, we can use ethnographic techniques to investigate this relationship then between the consumer and his or her brand. And that therefore begs the question then, as you cast your mind back to our session on research methods, I just use the key word now, ethnographic research, ethnography. What is that? As a technique, it's a methodology. We talked about 3 techniques. Research by observation is one, and research by observation is called what? Ethnography. Yeah. Okay, so we need to know this kind of things. So research by observation is ethnography, and that's a very powerful way by which we as marketers then can learn about the relationship between consumers and their brands. So that is a key thing, right? We also recognize that, when we look at brands and branding at a retailer level, right? Retailer, that entity that basically provides products to consumers for end use. There are some key types of broad categories of brands that are important in that context. One is what we call a national brand. And what do you think a national brand is? I'll give you one guess. What is a national brand? A brand that's
operates-
available nationally,
Yeah.
right?
Within a
So what are we
national
talking about? How about your Tim Hortons? Your TD? You know,
IRCC.
Campbell's Soup, big, you know, these are all national
National.
brands. How about if national brands or brands that are available nationally, what about regional brands? What about them? What do you think a regional brand is? It's a brand that is available in a limited geographic area, right? Take, for example, here in Windsor, brewing industry for beer. There is a very prominent, well-established local brewery called Walkerville Brewery.
Yeah.
And Walkerville Brewery, they make, you know, they have quite a robust portfolio of brands, and they're all locally available here primarily to the Windsor, Southwestern Ontario area. What is that?
Regional
beer, not national. You can't
Region.
get it in Vancouver, you can't get
Yeah.
it in St. John's, Newfoundland.
It's
So
only based on
here.
this particular.
Can you get it in Detroit?
To my knowledge, no, I don't believe so, but I do stand to be corrected on that. Walkerville beer, I don't believe you can get it in Detroit. But it really doesn't matter, because Detroit, for microbreweries, they have a very robust microbrewing, little micro industry out there in Detroit too, by the way. Yeah, I've done consulting research with some of those guys over in Detroit too, by the way, in that industry, so yeah. Yeah, and then of course there are value brands, right? And we sort of touched on that a little earlier. What was the example of a value brand that I actually physically mentioned a little while ago?
No.
A value brand.
Value.
Apple.
Apple, are you
No, no,
kidding
no.
me?
This is like value.
Apple, a value brand?
It's a cost
No, no, no,
leadership
no,
thing.
no. Timex, exactly, Timex. Timex is a value brand, right? It's all about low price, right, to a large
Yeah.
extent. Low price, maximizing the benefits, that's what Timex is all about, right? So Timex is a very prominent value brand. And then, of course, relatedly, we have a whole lot of private label brands, right? So what are some examples of private label brands?
Target.
Private label brand?
Is that the brand? Is that the brand?
So a private label brand is essentially a retailer-owned brand.
Oh, great.
Yes, exactly right, yeah. So a retailer-owned brand is a proprietary brand, i.e. a private label brand. So you walk into a Walmart and you see your, you walk into a Costco and you see your,
Okay.
you go into a Shoppers and you see your, or Loblaws, or a Zehrs. Exactly right, yeah, exactly. And by the way, from a marketing perspective, we love private label brands, right, to a large extent, because it provides, you know, more of a diverse, use your favorite word, diversified product offering. We can enhance that for the customer, so it's good in that regard. We can offer it, you know, at branded price or slightly lower, very attractive to consumers. But the important thing that we love in business with private label brands very often is that they are higher margins. We can sell them at higher margins. Right? Lower price, but higher margins, right? Which is nice, right? That's what we want. And very often, not always, certainly not always, but very often, these private label brands, these proprietary products, by the way, are products that essentially are, that come right out of manufacturing facilities of expensive branded products too. For example, very often, not always, but very often when you buy Kirkland branded coffee beans, ground, you know what that is? Starbucks. So if you pull out a Kirkland, bottle of thing, very often it will be the identical product that Kirkland makes. That Starbucks will sell. Not always, but very often. And a variety of other things like that. Candy too is an interesting thing too. Yeah. Anyways. So those kind of things. Those are private labels. And so basically, it also bears mentioning, whenever we're talking about branding, it also bears emphasizing, what about the digital world, right? What is important here when we're trying to engage in brand building efforts online? What's important here? Well, there's some key things to remember here. First of all, what do we want to do then as marketers to, let's say, the consumer at the start of the consumer journey online? What do we want to do? The consumer comes to our landing page, whatever it happens to be, whether we're a major retailer or a brand or whatever, what do we want to do? We want to bring the consumer in, right? In other words, we want to immediately engage the consumer. We can do that in a number of ways.
Pop-ups.
First way, after bringing the consumer in, we want to engage them, and we can do that by creating a very interactive website. That's key. Interactive website. We also want to, and this typically you won't see in the textbook, but the research clearly shows us now, what we want to do also, and I think I might have mentioned it to you when we were talking about information search, we also want to try to engage the consumer by providing some kind of a little video on the landing page, which will draw the consumer in, right? I think I mentioned that to you. And that's a key thing, and we find, and the research is quite clear, that when we do that, we can enjoy, upwards of a 75–80% higher probability of conversion at the back end, as opposed to not doing it. So in other words, when we do it, there's about a 70–80% chance that the consumer will in fact end up by buying what we are trying to sell. And that's a good thing. Why?
Higher
Just by engaging
conversion,
the consumer,
higher sales.
which is especially important because, as I told you in a previous class, we recognize that the online consumer, their attention span is progressively getting shorter and shorter and shorter. In 2002, the average attention span, as I had said, was 12 seconds. Today, it's like about 7 seconds. So it's progressively getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So that's a key thing, right? So as marketers, we need to figure out how to work with that kind of a thing, and that is one of which we can do it. So fundamentally, the way that we can sort of build our digital brand then is to basically, as I always say, apply those same basic marketing, that same basic marketing knowledge that this course is all about, to what we do online, right? And that is a key thing. So, invariably what it is, it's about engaging the consumer, and then what do we want to do before that? We want to try to drive the consumer to our website. And there are a variety of ways that we can do that, for example. Because we recognize that online consumer journey is something that we as marketers can manage, right? We can take a consumer on a journey online, that we want them to engage in, right? And my research, in fact, has shown that. So that is key. So another related notion then, related to branding, is, like I said, setting up that connection. And one of the words that I had used is this notion that we call product positioning. Positioning is probably one of the most important things in marketing. Positioning is. So what is it? Well, it's built on communication for sure, and you can think of positioning essentially as being that space that the brand occupies in the mind of the consumer. It's that place that the brand occupies in the mind of the consumer. So to sort of put a little bit more substance onto that point, what is it all about? It's all about how,
Consumer.
the brand resides in the mind of the consumer relative to competitors along some key attributes. That's what positioning is all about. So, yeah, that's essentially what it is, and that will come to light momentarily. Now, it really requires requirements. It really requires a very dedicated, focused marketing program in order to effectively achieve positioning. Right? In other words, we have to very carefully orchestrate and develop our 4P framework. So when we look at it that way, then what is it? Well, one way that we can do it in marketing is to use a tool that we call a perceptual map. And this is an example of a perceptual map. Easy peasy, nothing complicated here. So what is a perceptual map? A perceptual map here is a two-dimensional representation of where a focal brand resides in the mind of the consumer, again, relative to competitors within the product category typically, along some key dimensions that are attributes here. So if you look at this, for example, you see here, if we are, let's say, a Shredded Wheat brand manager in Canada, right? We know that we have some key competitors out there in the product category. And some of those key competitors are indicated on the map. So if we recognize that there are some fundamental attributes that are important to consumers within that category, we can sort of plot competitors in that regard. And so what is important to consumers in our product category is paramount. Taste is a key thing. What's another thing?
Nutrition.
Nutritional value is what we're saying, right?
Right.
So then you basically go through a process of plotting it on, and that's a whole thing in itself, by the way, that we won't get into. But then you plot it on, and then this is the kind of thing that emerges. So there are a couple of takeaways here from this example. First of all, when we go through this exercise, this positioning exercise, using a perceptual map, there's some key things. First of all, it allows us to effectively formulate our core marketing strategy. And you will know that our core marketing strategy, as I've told you before, I've said it several times, can be based on two major kind of approaches. One is growth, and the other one is positioning. So if we jump into positioning, fundamentally then we can think about another sort of category in positioning, and that is either going head-to-head or differentiation. So we look at ours here, and we look at our closest neighbor here, which is Cheerios. Pursuant to this, we are suggesting, this map is suggesting then that in the mind of the consumer, Cheerios basically is occupying the same competitive space as our focal brand, Shredded Wheat. So what does that mean then? We need to go head to head against the Cheerios here. And so to do that, we do a whole bunch of marketing things. Not the least of which is to essentially communicate to the consumer that, hey, you know what? Our brand is better than Cheerios. Drink Coke, it's better than Pepsi, like head to head. Buy our Toyota Corolla, not the Hyundai Accent, right? Head to head, same competitive space. Conversely, how about Cocoa Puffs? Well, it's still a competitor out there, but here it's more about differentiation, right? It's not a head-to-head kind of competition here. So it's more of a differentiation. So here then our message is along the lines of differentiation. Here the message is along the lines of, okay, we're trying to communicate to the consumer that our brand within the product category is the superior brand, right? So out of the product category overall, we're better than all the rest type of thing, right? That's the kind of thinking generally that we bring to bear here. So that is what we call a perceptual map. And so, we can, it's a very useful tool that we can use in a variety of things. It also allows us, importantly, as indicated here, to identify an important strategic kind of conclusion here. And that is, it also allows us to identify potential opportunities. So here, for example, going through the analysis, we see that, guess what? There's no real competitor out there, no brand that's occupying that good taste, high nutritional kind of space. So what? So, well, maybe we as brand managers here, maybe we can capitalize on that and introduce a product here, right? Perhaps we can get involved in a line extension, right? Or introduce a new product, or something like that. So that's the kind of thinking that we bring to bear here. Let's talk a little bit about another topic area that, again, we introduced during our class number 1 on the video, yeah? And that is what? Trivial attributes. And yeah, that is the picture that we were talking about earlier, right? You mentioned that, right? So that is the key thing, and we talked all about that. What is it? It is the clinical thing. So you remember then that when we talk about trivial attributes, there's a new thing, I just put that up last week actually. What's the trivial attribute here, by the way?
Mountain grown. Mountain grown.
What does mountain grown mean to you? Huh? What does it mean? If you talk about mountain grown, does it make you feel good? How about mountain grown versus gutter?
Yeah.
How about mountain grown versus swamp grown? Right? Does swamp grown make you feel good? I'm being facetious here. Does mountain grown make you feel better in relation to that? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Up in the mountain, right? What happens up in the mountain? Fresh water and all, the whole thing. Right? Now, is it really grown in the mountains? Yeah, no. I mean, primarily I suspect that, Mother Market is absolutely valued brand. And, it can come from anywhere. Certainly not all the coffee primarily out of Brazil or Colombia. Some might come out from mountains, but it certainly is a thing. So it is a trivial attribute here. So when we talk about a trivial attribute, what are we talking about here? Here it is an attribute that's assigned to a product that has no functional capability. That's what a trivial attribute is. It has no functional capability at all. So it's basically just put on, and why is it so powerful? Because it changes the way by which the consumer will make the decision. It changes the entire decision-making framework of the consumer. So you see mountain grown here, and all of a sudden the consumer thinks completely different about that. Use the word clinical, all of a sudden there are all kinds of implications that we weave to the consumer, right? Clinical, what do we mean? Extensively tested, more effective, medically tested, all that kind of stuff, right? Am I right? So we get that point. So the same kind of a thing here. So really then, it allows us to differentiate a product using essentially a meaningless or an irrelevant attribute, but it allows us to do it in a very meaningful way. Right? And that's the thing. And that's the beauty behind that. And that's how it really works. It changes the framework, the cognitive framework by which we do that. So the key thing then here is that when we look at that, we recognize some key things, and this is the research from Carpenter and Olives, which I think is very interesting too. Here we have, so we recognize then that when subjects in their research were not apprised of the irrelevance of the attribute, they didn't know. All they saw was that trivial attribute, right? They valued that brand with the trivial attribute higher than the non-trivial attributes, more favorable. They liked it. They don't know anything about it, but they liked it. So here's the interesting thing. When the irrelevance of the attribute was disclosed, was revealed to subjects, you know what? They still liked the trivial attribute brand better than the other ones. So that tells us then that even when they didn't know, they still like it. That tells us then that, you know what, it's a very, very powerful instrument that we can use here, so to speak, trivial attributes. So then they drilled into this in more detail and said, okay, what is another important feature here in any kind of product? What is it? Price is very important. So then they looked at the role of price with trivial attributes. And so at the end of the day, they made this conclusion, and that is in order to maximize the effect of the trivial attribute brand, you want to adopt a price level that is classified as being moderate. Moderate. Not high, not low, moderate. And so what does that look like? It's something like this. If we have price, and we have, let's say, I'm using the word valuation here. Valuation here. We have price at, say, low, medium, and high. Are you with me here? What we're saying then is that in order to maximize the valuation of the trivial attribute brand, we want to adopt a price strategy, price point that is moderate, right? And here I'm talking conceptually, moderate price, not high, not low. So basically we're saying something like this. But the valuation of the trivial attribute brand is maximized under a condition of moderate price, and that's what we're saying here. Are you with me? So that's what it looks like. So, moderate price. Is that clear? I hope that's clear to everybody. It's not clear, just let me know. I'm glad we explained it. Yes? Okay. So really then, we recognize that price is a very, very important feature, as we already do know. And we also recognize then that price really lends a lot of information regarding the product to the consumer. So therefore, key thing is then that we want to price at a moderate level. And it also allows us to make another conclusion, and that is, you know, that the uniqueness associated with the trivial attribute is not the only thing that is important here. Price also has a huge role to play. So that is key. The uniqueness of the trivial attribute associated with the price that can really maximize the overall impact of the product with the trivial attribute. And so here you see, you know, vitamin, this is shampoo, right? Vitamin and strength. Vitamin. The word vitamin, right? Well, you can pump all the vitamins you want into shampoo and it will not do anything for you because fundamentally hair are dead cells. So, you know, you can pump vitamin, but it does nothing, right? But again, like silk, it sort of conveys this kind of thing to the consumer, right? So you get that going. Now let's talk a little bit about new product development here. New product development. New product development. Here we're going to talk a little bit about motherhood-ish kind of things here a little bit. And so then we can say, okay, well, what really defines what a new product is? So when we talk about a new product and new product development, there are three major approaches here that we can use. First of all, there is what we call a classically innovative product. And what is that? A classically innovative product is also known as a new to the world product, right? It's new to the world product, never, you know, in the marketplace has this product being used before. It also includes what we call a radical innovation, which is also under this category. A radical innovation, and what a radical innovation is it is that product which not only is a new product, but it also spawns a brand new industry. So what would be an example of that? When Henry Ford introduced his brand new motorized buggy called the Model T, there were no cars before that. What is that? New product to car, but in addition to that, it spawned an entire new
Category.
industry. New industry. New industry. And what is that? A radical innovation. I would argue that even the, you know, the iPhone, I would argue was really a radical innovation too, because then that came directly out of the mind of Steve Jobs, right? Because before that, before the first iPhone, I mean, you know, before the first iPhone, a phone was simply just a cellular phone, a means of talking to people, that's all it was, right? But the iPhone, the smartphone, if you will, whole new industry that Steve Jobs invented, radical innovation. It really spawned an entire industry whereby that instrument that everybody seems to use quite a bit here, you know, allows internet usage, talking to other people, communication, searches, mail, email, all that kind of stuff, right? So I would argue that that really spawned an entire new industry. There's also what we call new category entries, right? And the new category entry is also sort of new to the company product, right? It's new to the company. That's what a new category entry is. And of course, we have product line extensions. And as we had spoken about before, a product line extension is something whereby a new product really is introduced that based on a previous base product is sort of a new flavor or a new color or some kind of technical variation, if you will. Product line extension within the same product category. Within the same product category. So that really is what we mean by new products. When we talk about new product development here at a broad level, fundamentally there are three major sort of ways by which we can think about how new products are developed. First of all, in terms of development, the first thing is what we call the linear approach, right? That classic linear approach. And the classic linear approach is really whereby we manage that new product through successive and sequential steps, whereby one group will hand off control to another group, to another. So in other words, you might start off after having gone through, you know, an idea generation phase. You know, you might, you know, start off with R&D guys, handing it over to manufacturing guys, handing it over to, say, marketing guys, and handing it over to sales folks, right? So basically, these teams will hand off to other teams until we get market introduction. What do we call that? Classical in here. We also have sort of the opposite approach, which is what we can call more of a rugby approach, right? And that is where we have, you know, a highly iterative, multifunctional kind of a team, which is developed, and they will accept the product, and they will see it all the way through to introduction
to the market.
right? So, you know, cross-functional team, you could have an R&D guy, manufacturing guy on it, a sales guy, marketing guy, and a bunch of other folks on it, all on that team, and they see it right through to the end. And then lastly, we could also engage in what we call more of a target costing kind of an approach where we, you know, determine the final selling price of the product, and then we basically work backwards from there to ensure that whatever we do, we meet that end target in terms of price, right? And so that's another valid way too. So when we talk about bringing a product to market, we recognize then that, you know, regardless of the nuances here that we're talking about, they all pretty well go through the same stages, so to speak, the same general steps, right? And really, to a large extent, here's an important point. It starts off with idea generation. Idea generation. So if I were to say to you, what's the first step in new product development, and you would say maybe idea generation as being the key step, right? Yeah, I think so. So idea generation or concept generation, that is the first step. And then we get into more screening of the product. Then we get into a more formalized product definition. We then forecast demand, and then we engage ultimately into a product launch. So now, a couple of basic stuff there. So then, the last topic area that I want to talk to you about, that I think is very important, I always impart this to my students, and you typically don't see this in the textbooks either, but it's very important because if you graduate and if you get a job in this kind of a domain, you might be forced with, having to manage some kind of a failure. Right, a brand failure, some kind of a critical kind of thing where there's a major brand failure that exists. And so really then, it behooves the manager then to understand what happens when there is a major brand failure. And that's what I try to bring to my students. So really, here I dip into the research of again my friend Neeraj Dewar and Palutla 2000 and several other pieces of research that they produced. And they investigated what we call product hard prices, And so it starts with understanding what it is that we're talking about. So to set up the stage here a little bit, we recognize that fundamentally, when we talk about some kind of a brand failure, ultimately we are concerned as marketers, we're concerned about the effect that that situation will have on brand equity. That's what we're concerned about. And so we recognize then that, and I described what brand equity was to you, but we also recognize that, yeah, consumers have those associations in their mind, right, regarding brand equity. We recognize that it's those associations that exist in their minds that really leads to that brand equity, and as I described it. You want me to describe it again, or do you remember?
Mm.
You remember?
Mm.
You don't remember? You want me to say it again? The benefits that accrue to the consumer over and above the functional benefits, right?
Yeah.
So brand equity. So we're concerned about the effect that some failure will have on brand equity. And why specifically are we concerned about that? Well, we recognize some key features associated with brand equity. First of all, it takes a long time to build. It's a very effortful process to build brand equity. However, notwithstanding that, here's the key point. We recognize that brand equity is fundamentally very, very fragile. It's a very fragile thing. It can disappear in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat, it can be gone. So brand equity is a key thing, very, very fragile. So then the question becomes, okay, well, when something bad happens, how do we sort of deal with the fragility associated with it? Well, here's the key thing. When we talk about like a major crisis, the obvious situation then is, how does the firm deal with it, right? So the first variable that we are concerned about is firm's response. How does the firm respond? So again, speaking very conceptually, if we say, yeah, the firm responded great, it's a solid firm, we believe that they are responding very well, the firm's response is very good. If that is a situation, What kind of an effect do you think that will have on brand equity? Okay? It will reduce, right? It will reduce. That response will reduce
The
negative impact on brand equity, right? Obviously.
Firefighting.
But here's the thing. What Niraj here found was that firm response alone is insufficient to determine the overall effect on brand
Brand
equity.
equity.
Namely, we also have to consider consumer expectations of the firm in order to determine the overall effect on brand equity. That's what they found in their research. And numerous other supporting areas of research has confirmed that. So what are we saying here? We're essentially saying then, I will say it again, Niraj, Dewar, and Paluco, they looked at the critical harm crisis here through the lens, the theoretical lens of what we call expectations, consumer expectations, right? And again, they found that, and this is the key issue, that firms' response alone is insufficient to determine the negative effect on brand equity. And they found then that you also, if you were to manage this and understand it appropriately, you need to also consider the role of customer expectations. And so this is a diagrammatic way of saying this, that firms' response together with consumer expectations, will determine the effect on brand equity. In other words, there's an interaction effect. These two variables work together to determine the impact on brand equity. So if the firm responds supremely well, consumers realize it, they love the firm, they recognize that they're doing very well, they're responding brilliantly, that will have it will mitigate the negative effect on brand equity. That's the point. That is the point. Here, and that's the key thing across the board. So what are some major examples then of when things go wrong? Were all you guys here last fall? Were you here last fall, yes or no?
No.
No, you were not here last fall?
Like
Who was
this
here
fall?
last fall? Yeah. Do you remember a guy coming to talk here at Odette, a guy named Michael McCain? You remember that?
Yeah.
Did anybody here go to see McCain?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. And Michael McCain was what?
The chairman of Maple. Maple.
Maple Leaf Foods, exactly right, yeah. Now, in fact, I've used his example on several papers that I've written on leadership, by the way. But, one question emerged out of this. He didn't bring it up, but somebody asked him this, which is a good thing because I had it in the back of my mind, but I wasn't going to ask him. But somebody did ask him, and you might remember that somebody asked him about that major critical harm crisis, that brand failure that happened to Maple Leaf Foods when he was the CEO. You might remember that. That resulted in the death of several people. I don't know whether you remember that or not, but it was a major thing. And so basically what happened then is that in 2008, at a Maple Leaf meat processing plant near Hamilton, just outside of Toronto, near Hamilton, Listeriosis virus spread into the plant, and it resulted in the death of 23 people who consumed the meat. 23 people died as a result of consuming the Maple Leaf meat. Pretty serious. And well over 50-something others, 56 cases subsequently were documented as a result of that, documented cases. We can assume that there are a whole lot more, right? So your brand, your CEO, you're responsible for, a major corporate brand called Maple Leaf Foods here, and 23 people die as a result of consuming the brand. that's a pretty serious thing, right? That is a pretty serious thing. And that is absolutely a product not pricing right there. So the question becomes then is, well, what do you do about it, right? And, you know, Michael McCain, as I have written about numerous times, he really demonstrated the textbook way of handling that kind of a thing from a leadership perspective. What did he do? Contrary to the advice of the lawyers, he got out in front of the media, in front of the cameras, when that story was breaking, and he said, this is a situation. Sadly, so far, there being some loss of life. We're in the process of investigating it. We will continue to disclose information as it sort of emerges, right? So what happens here? He got in front of the story. He became the face of the brand and of the company. And that face was a very heartfelt, honest,
Genuine and sincere.
genuine, beautiful, yes, thank you. Genuine kind of a perspective. In other words, the firm's response
Of course, no.
was very, very substantial there. And anyway, long story short, they weathered the storm and they got through it very, very well. And they bounced back. Why? Because he handled it very well. The firm's response was excellent, consumer expectations. They saw that, they liked it, they expected it to be good. So the overall effect was, right? We look at probably what I would say is the opposite way of dealing with a major brand catastrophe here, which in my opinion was flubbed and screwed by the CEO of BP Oil. So you will remember, I hope, that in 2010, there was a major oil rig, deep sea drilling rig in the Gulf of Mexico that blew out. It killed 11 workers, numerous others injured, right? South of Mexico. And as a result of that catastrophe, get this, 4.9 million barrels, 4.9 million barrels of crude oil gushed into the Gulf of Mexico. You know, creating an environmental catastrophe. Yeah, and that basically represents 210 million gallons of crude oil gushing into the pristine Gulf of Mexico. Devastating. So did that create a significant effect on brand equity? Yes, it did. And in that case, without getting into the details, the firm's response was terrible. It lasted for months. The CEO said stupid things. They flubbed the whole thing. And they, at the end of it, they needed to re-engage in a major brand building effort, BP did, which largely they did successfully. Anyway, so that is, those are some key examples, right? And we see basically, you know, it really started on, this is an example all business students I think should be aware of. And that is that, you know, in 1982, you know what I want to call. So what is a product harm crisis? Product harm crisis then is where we have a discrete, well-publicized occurrence where some products are found to be defective. That's what a product harm crisis is. A discrete, well-publicized occurrence where some products are found to be defective or dangerous. Yeah, that's essentially what it is. So, yeah, it is key. And, you know, consumer expectations are very important. So, yeah, there's a lot to it. We need to know this kind of stuff is marketed. So, I will remind you that, you know, Reading Week is coming up. You know, we have a midterm exam coming up. That will be a day of reckoning. And, you know, it will take place on the 1st of March. 7:30, it will take place, as I've told you before, this is nothing new, in the Odette Auditorium. We will cover the material weeks 1 through 7, including the material that we will cover first up, which is communications next class. So we'll cover everything up to, you know, week number 7. And so in the strongest you know, in the strongest terms, I would urge you to certainly continue. If you haven't started already, I would strongly urge you to study hard over the reading week. Good opportunity. So with that in mind, have a great evening.
Thank you.